Released by Jaime Muson and filmed in San Vicente in Chicolo, I should have practiced this one, in Mexico on February 23rd at around 1:30 a.m. So it's moving fairly smoothly there. A straight trajectory. The dogs are reacting to it, so they don't know what the hell it is. It's changed course. The shape of it, the form, keeps changing. And I believe it's moving slower on the way out than on the way in. Comes from a fairly high altitude. It's sinking. Do balloons do that? Possibly a garbage bag, but it stops sinking and then it changes directions and floats off in another direction. You can't really tell what the weather situation is, whether there's a wind about, or I guess that's the only thing that could move a garbage bag. And it looks solid on the way out. It looks sort of translucent on the way in, and on the way out there it looks solid. That could just be something to do with the camera. Hello, welcome to News from the Fringe. I'm Chris. That was a weird video, wasn't it? Not sure what to say about that one, because like the usual excuses, like I said, balloons and garbage bags don't seem to fit. Jaime Muson reckons it's two humanoid entities floating above the dogs, but I cannot see that at all. But it is a strange one, and yeah, there's a lot of strange stuff that happens in Mexico, isn't there? Lots of weird UFO videos and flying humans or witches and this sort of thing. Gnomes. Gnomes attacking kids. So, what have we got today? First up, I've got this photograph. This is a photograph that a friend sent me. I was actually on the phone to her at the time, and she goes, because we don't live too far from each other. And she goes, go outside, have a look at the sky, what's that? And I went out there and I couldn't see anything where I was because I'm further inland. She lives right on the coast. And she said, yeah, there's this weird light in the sky. And I said, quick, take a photo of it for us. And so she did, she sent it through, and this is what I got. The time of the photograph was pretty much exactly at sunset, so it's got to be the sun. And it looks like the sun, it's just a strange looking sunset. So I thought it was interesting. It's I don't think it's anything paranormal or supernatural. It's just a sunset. But it's a cool looking sunset, so I thought I'd share it with you. Okay, so let's move on. An explanation for the Dyatlov Pass incident. The Dyatlov Pass incident involved a group of 9 students who went missing after going for a trek in the Ural Mountains, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. They departed on January 23rd, 1959 and were never seen again, alive. When rescue teams went to look for them, they found the group's tent, which appeared to have been sliced open from the inside with a sharp instrument, up on the slopes of Mount Colat, Siakal. The hikers' belongings were strewn all over the campsite, and a trail of footprints indicated that they had got up and left in a hurry, some of them without any shoes or socks. After following the trail for 1.5 kilometers, the rescuers discovered 5 bodies, many exhibiting signs of physical trauma such as a cracked skull and broken ribs. No sign of the other 4 members of the group could be found. However, after an extensive search covering 2 months, rescuers eventually located their remains in nearby woodlands. A criminal investigation later blamed their deaths on an, quote, an unknown compelling force. Several decades later, however, a new study published in the Journal of Communications, Earth and Environment put forward the theory that the hikers had died from an unusual form of small-scale, delayed avalanche. And I just wanted to quickly read this from Wikipedia. After the group's bodies were discovered, an investigation by Soviet authorities determined that 6 had died from hypothermia, while the other 3 had been killed by physical trauma. 1 victim had major skull damage, 2 had severe chest trauma, and another had a small crack in the skull. 4 of the bodies were found lying in running water in a creek, and 3 of these had soft tissue damage to the head and face. 2 of the bodies were missing their eyes, 1 was missing its tongue, and 1 was missing its eyebrows. Some of the theories that have been put forward to account for the unexplained deaths include animal attacks, hypothermia, avalanche, katabatic winds, infrasound-induced panic, military involvement, or some combination of these. Russia opened a new investigation to the incident in 2019, and its conclusions were presented in July of 2020, that an avalanche had led to the deaths. Survivors of the avalanche had been forced to suddenly leave their camp in low visibility conditions with inadequate clothing. They had died of hypothermia. Andrei Kuryakov, deputy head of the regional prosecutor's office, said, quote, "It was a heroic struggle. There was no panic, but they had no chance to save themselves under the circumstances." I don't know much about this case, but this explanation doesn't seem adequate to me, but who am I? For instance, would an avalanche bury the campsite? So would there be anything... Why would the campsite still be sitting on top of the avalanche? And if it was, how was anyone injured by it? It's... Like I said before, I don't know anything about snow, so maybe I'm just talking crap here. But to me, it just doesn't make sense. Unless maybe... But I'm wondering if an avalanche would actually bury the campsite. Because from the way they've described it, it sounds like the campsite was strewn across the surface of the avalanche. But maybe what's happened is there's been an avalanche and maybe it's defrosted, I don't know. And the leftovers of the campsite are now sitting on the surface. I don't know. And also he says here in his report, he says, quote, "It was a heroic struggle. There was no panic." But how do you explain, if there's no panic, why are you cutting the tent open? And why are you running off without shoes and socks and adequate clothing? To me, it sounds like there was definitely a panic. So that sort of casts doubt for me, that comment there. What else? Yeah, so they say that the footprints went for 1.5 kilometers, which is just under a mile. And if you've got injuries, like a cracked skull or crushed torso or whatever, how the hell are you going to walk 1.5k in poor lighting conditions, freezing cold? That doesn't make sense to me either. What else have we got here? Yeah, so would they, in the snow, I've heard, I guess, it's actually warmer to take your snow gear off and sleep in your what do you call it? The sleeping bag with less clothes on, and it actually, the body heat is more effective then. So I guess I can understand why they didn't have many clothes on in freezing conditions. So. Also, the missing eyes and tongues and eyebrows. Like, I guess the eyebrows could have been, if they were in an avalanche, were they just grinded off? I don't know. Like, is that possible? That they got tumbled about and their eyebrows just got sort of grinded off on the ice. And the eyes and the tongue, like, fair enough, you could just say that's scavengers, but were they like pecked out or chewed out, or were they just like cleanly removed, the eyes and the tongue? That'd be something I'd want to know details about. Because, you know, the classic alien mutilations on the cows, their eyes go and their tongue goes. So is that something consistent with those cattle mutilations? So yeah, that was just a few questions that came to my mind when I read through that article. I'm sure you guys have got even better ones than that. And maybe you can explain or answer some of these questions that I've put out here. So anyway, we should move on, shouldn't we? Dan's cursed painting. A weird thing collector who paid $50 for a painting at a flea market, despite explicitly being warned that it brought nothing but misfortune, now claims that the haunted artwork has changed his life for the worse. Dan Smith, not his real name, bought the unnamed painting of $2 at a flea market, ignoring the former owner's warnings that it was bad news. If anything, the fact that it was a bad luck charm was something of a bonus, as he wanted to test it out for himself. Unfortunately, his curiosity had a high price, as he claims he went on an epic losing streak as soon as he brought it home with him. Smith said that he started losing sleep, discovered an insect infestation in his house, and the death of his pet hamster, who had always been in perfect health. Poor little hamster. Sickness, loneliness, sleeplessness, and uneasiness all started to creep into his previously happy life, and he is convinced that it's all because of the painting. Now he's auctioning it off on eBay in an attempt to get his old life back. I think it might be a bit late for his hamster. Dan said, quote, "The woman at the flea market warned me before buying this, and I will warn you. No good can come from this painting. I didn't think much of it at the time and just assumed she was one of those oddball dealers hawking their wares for cheap. As for the painting, it looked adorable. I disagree, it looks pretty... That's not my style. It looked adorable, with two innocent-seeming dolls portrayed in it. But she was right. Don't be deceived. I don't know whose cursed blood was mixed in with the paint to create this piece. I don't know where he's getting blood from, but... you know, if it sells his piece, then good on him. But its powers are strong. Why not destroy it, you wonder? Well, sure, setting the painting on fire could rid the world of the wickedness brought about by the piece. But it could just as easily unleash the evil. Jeez, he's really selling this thing, isn't he? Who's to say by burning it I'm not just going to make things 10 times worse? He's got a good point. I'm starting the auction at $50, which is what I paid for it, but I'm hoping it goes for more to make up for everything I've been through. But before you bid, you have been warned, he said. And so, if this is true, if it's really caused all this bad luck in his life, I reckon it's more of a case of his beliefs basically creating mischief in his life. You know, I'm a big believer that, like, your deep-seated, like, under the surface, underneath your ego, all of those sort of desires and beliefs actually generate the life around you, or the reality, I should say, around you. So, I want to look into that more. I've got some... It's a subject that I'm really interested in. Because it aligns with spirituality and mysticism and all of that sort of stuff, and I'm kind of into that. I like that sort of stuff, so I'm going to be looking into that more later. Anyway, let's go on. Here we got a poltergeist in Bolton in the UK. At a glance, Wingate's Grove in Horton. At a glance, Wingate's Grove in West Horton, Bolton, seems perfectly innocuous, a quaint residential street that most people would be more than happy to move to. This idyllic exterior, however, hides a sinister haunting, an alleged poltergeist so persistent in its ambitions that some of the residents have had to sign a disclaimer before being allowed to move in. The activity began in 1993, when one of the houses became home to a spate of paranormal occurrences that prompted the owner to seek a local church to perform an exorcism. While this seemed to work for a while, the activity began again with a vengeance in 1999. This time, the paranormal activity was reported by a family who was living in a house 2 doors down. Quote, "I begged my mum not to move in," said Laura, now 34, who moved there as a teenager. "I didn't like the feel of it. I didn't feel comfortable. But when we got our stuff in, it faded a bit. When things started happening, my mum would say it was the ghost of my granddad, but I said it wasn't. I just knew there was something there. It felt like I was walking into someone's personal space. I didn't want to walk through the door." The phenomena ranged from items being mysteriously moved or held up by an unknown force, the brief possession of family members, dead crows turning up in the garden, and sightings of a strange oil-like substance which had previously been seen in the original haunted property. The alleged poltergeist was so notorious that even Bolton Council was unable to find an explanation, and when current owner Karen Walton moved there in 2006, she had to sign a waiver requiring her not to use a Ouija board and not to move in if she had young children. Jeez. That's interesting. Unlike the previous owners, however, she found the whole thing quite intriguing. Quote, "I think it's quite novel. I quite like it," she said. "It's a selling point for me." Close quote. So this is similar to the previous story, isn't it? Where the owner is kind of asking for trouble. Like they've been warned multiple times. They're fully aware that there's a problem, a paranormal problem with the property. And they willingly take it on. And I find it really interesting that official documents are being drawn up now to sign waivers not to try and encourage paranormal activity, which, according to mainstream, doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, why are we signing these waivers? So I think society's starting to relax a little bit and open up and not feel so embarrassed about these strange things that we can't explain. So this is a good thing. Alright, let's move on to the next one. A mysterious boom jolted a seismologist awake on a Washington island on March 7. Seismologists have not pinpointed what caused the loud boom on Orcas Island, according to the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. Tom Owens, a retired seismologist, heard the boom at around 4 a.m. and reported it to the network to see if it was captured on the seismic stations in the San Juan Islands. Sure enough, the boom was recorded on multiple stations. Seismologists located the source of the boom near the Crescent Beach Preserve in the northern part of the island near Ship Bay. The seismologists discovered the boom was neither a shaking source in the ground nor a meteor. The agency said, instead the boom was consistent with the velocity of acoustic sound waves in the air. A seismologist also ruled out whether the boom was man-made, like a mining blast, because all explosions must be done during the day, the agency said. A sonic boom from a military exercise could have been another cause for the boom, the agency said, but artillery practice and supersonic aircrafts are easily recognizable by the cone shape generated by sonic booms. The Naval Air Station at Whidbey Island told McClatchy News that there was not a sonic boom near Orcas Island and that supersonic flights in the area are not allowed. March 7 wasn't the first time that Owens was startled with a mysterious boom. He heard a similar boom in December and saw a flash from his bedroom window. The agency said the booms could have been illegal explosives, but they have not been able to confirm that. I've always been interested in mysterious sounds like that, like booms. And can you remember the trumpets? The end times? Everyone was freaking out over that. And also, there's those weird underground sounds, which are always intriguing. You get your booms, you got vibrations that people hear, and often sounds of construction, like someone's building maybe a tunnel or something under the ground. Excuse me, I feel like I got a cough or sneeze or something. But I'm right. Don't worry. I'm right. And so, just looking at my note here, that reminds me of a story that I just recently read, and I can't remember where I read it or I heard it somewhere, where there was a couple of researchers in Roswell, and they were directed to put their ear up next to or onto I think it was like a telegraph pole or something like that. And they reckon they could hear underground activity under Roswell. So that's interesting. I'll have to dig that up again for you. I should be able to find it. I've probably copy pasted it somewhere in my in my folder of 1,000 stories. But anyway, let us continue. What have we got? Brain patterns at the moment of death. Scientists have accidentally discovered what goes on inside a human brain just before a person dies, after a man with epilepsy died of a heart attack while undergoing a brain scan to detect and treat his seizures. The subsequent study of the man's brain activity suggests an explanation for people who report the experience of vivid life recall in near-death experiences. Scientists were first using electroencephalography, EEG, to detect and treat seizures in the 87-year-old man when he passed away, leading to the first ever recording of a brain's activity during death. Dr. Ajmal Zemar, a neurosurgeon at the University of Louisville, who organized the study of the recording, has said that the research shows that people may in fact relive their lives in the seconds before they die. He explained that the researchers focused on the activity in the man's brain in the 30 seconds before and after the heart stopped beating. Quote, "Just before and after the heart stopped working, we saw changes in a specific band of neural oscillations, so-called gamma oscillations, but also in others such as delta, theta, alpha, and beta oscillations," Zemar said. None of that made any sense to me. Brain oscillations, also known as brain waves, are patterns of rhythmic brain activity. The different types of waves, including gamma, are involved in high cognitive functions such as concentrating, dreaming, meditation, memory retrieval, information processing, and conscious perception, just like those associated with memory flashbacks. Quote, "Through generating oscillations involved in memory retrieval, the brain may be playing a last recall of important life events just before we die, similar to the ones reported in near-death experiences." Close quote. Studies have previously analyzed rats' brains as they died and have found increased activity in their brains in the 30 seconds after cardiac arrest. And so, I guess this brings us to that age-old debate about what consciousness is. Whether the physical brain creates consciousness or if it's more like a receiver for consciousness. And I've got to say, I'm in the camp of it's a receiver. It's like an antenna, sort of. I've got my own ideas on this, and it's going back to that thing about mysticism, spirituality, consciousness study, that sort of thing. It's something I'm really interested in, and I want to expand on it more, but this is not really the right time, I don't think, because I just want to get through this. I mean, I enjoy doing these videos, but I'd have to sit down and work out exactly how best to describe a very what's the word I'm looking for? Like deep subject. So I'll leave it for now, and I'm going to move on to the next story, which, not by accident, is related to the near-death experience. Here we go. An out-of-body experience. The last OOB experience I had was when I was having this sinus surgery. After the surgery, I was out of body and at the foot of the bed, next to two older nurse ladies. I felt very calm and just patiently waiting. The main nurse was bent over me. My body was still on the operating bed, which was lowered. She was doing something to me, but I couldn't see through her, so I bent down and moved to the right to see what she was doing. She was slapping my cheeks gently to wake me up, but it wasn't working. Then I saw her lift her right hand high up and go for a big slap. Remind you of anything? As soon as she hit me, I was instantly back in my body. I didn't even feel the slap. Just like Chris Rock. I just couldn't help myself. I apologize. I opened my eyes and said, wow. Then the two nurses said, he's fine, and started to leave the room. The main nurse asked if I was okay, and I said, yeah. I thought about telling her about the OOB, but I decided against it. So those astral experiences or out-of-body experiences where the observer is watching something that they physically cannot see from their bed, and they're out cold anyway, and they're observing this and they can remember all the details, and they come back and they go, this is what happened. To me, they're pretty compelling. I know there's, explanations where they're saying, oh, they can hear it and their brain's dreaming this whole thing up. They can feel sensations. But I don't buy that. I reckon astral projection and out-of-body experiences are a real phenomenon. And I find them really interesting. I really, really want to do this, get out of my body to experience it. I just think it would allay fears of death, I think, because you know that you can exist without this meat sack. And so, yeah, it's something that I'm keen to try and do. I've been trying for a long time now, but not much success. I've had a little bit of success, but I spoke about that in a different video. I won't go into it right now, because that's all I've got. That's it for today. And I just wanted to say too, before I do say goodbye, that I really appreciate the positive feedback that you guys give me in the comments. It's really sort of lifts me up and keeps me wanting to continue to post videos. So, thanks for that. I really do appreciate it. And having said that now, I'm going to bid you all farewell, and I hope you have a good week, and I'll see you in the comments, and see you later.